Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Uh, Over the last 2 days, we spoke about how Kerala is sandwiched between the ecologically sensitive Western Ghats and the sea, with the Coastal Regulations Act and restrictions coming into play. We spoke about the constraints we have in land availability that does not support mega factories. We spoke about high literacy, which leads to a brain drain and import of the labor class from other states into Kerala. We spoke about the disconnect between industry and academia, which has led to an unemployable workforce. We spoke about the delayed government reforms and the challenges in implementing it due to the cultural shift that is needed, the mind shift that is needed. We have spoken of all the challenges. So let's also speak about what is next for Kerala. I therefore invite Mr. Arun M. Kumar, Chairman and CEO KPMG in India, an accomplished global executive with experience spanning several sectors, and most recently served as the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Global Markets and Director General of the US and Foreign Commercial Service in the Obama administration. He is also the former partner and member of the Board of Directors at KPMG, and leading the firm's West Coast management, and founded and led KPMG's US-India practice. If I keep talking about everything that is in the resume, it's going to take away the entire 30 minutes that's been allotted for this session. I'm not going to do that, but we are honored to have you here, Mr. Arun Kumar. Thank you so much for joining us. It's still very early in North Carolina, but thank you for taking the time, and looking forward to hearing from you. Over to you.
Yeah. And thank you, Jimon. Thank you for that kind introduction. It is a great pleasure for me to be with TiE Kerala, albeit remotely, as I'm in the US at this time to celebrate Thanksgiving with family. I have great fondness for my association with TiE Kerala that goes back all the way to its beginnings, and to my many friendships, countless friendships in Kerala. So TiE Kerala has consistently forged an innovative and independent path and created an incarnation rooted in the needs of Kerala. It is not a copy or a mirror of any other TiE entity in the world. And I know that since I was with TiE Silicon Valley almost in the beginning, but TiE Kerala from the beginning has started a different path, which I greatly admire. And in fact, the exciting thing about Kerala itself is that as a state, it has been a leader and an innovator throughout its history and in its ethos. So the topic of my talk today is on new directions for Kerala in the wake of the pandemic, and I would add other global concerns. The COVID-19 pandemic came upon us suddenly a year and a half ago and spread rapidly. Alongside, we've been through a period where we have seen, especially in Kerala, continuing episodes of climate change related natural disasters. This existential vital concern was brought to the forefront at the recent COP26 meeting of global leaders in Glasgow. Most countries there committed themselves to clear emission reduction targets. The COP26 meeting set a global target for the world to be net zero by the middle of the century. This implies that the amount of greenhouse gases produced by human activity must be negated by other positive actions. These range from increasing forest and vegetative cover to migrating towards renewables for energy needs. In line with this compulsion, many firms are also adopting net zero targets and timelines. Some are even aiming to become carbon negative. This confluence of trends and events has brought the environmental, social, and governance ESG philosophy center stage for governments, firms, and other institutions. The evolving policy and regulatory landscape worldwide, as well as in India, will impact businesses. Firms will have no option but to elevate their objectives, procedures, and ways of working to comply with threshold standards across environmental impact, social interactions, and the quality of governance. In fact, the protection of the environment is acquiring legal heft, or the environment is acquiring legal heft. It's a very interesting concept. A landmark resolution adopted by the Human Rights Council of the United Nations recognizes the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right that is important for the enjoyment of other human rights. It is noteworthy that the right to a clean environment is now recognized in more than 100 national constitutions across the world. France has taken matters a step further by introducing a duty of vigilance law in 2017. This law holds companies responsible for preventing violations of human rights or environmental regulations throughout the entirety of their supply chain. These are really important developments, societal developments, international developments. This plethora of trends will increase the pressure on companies to hold themselves to higher ESG standards. These pressures are coming from shareholders, from affected communities, the media, other stakeholders, investors, be they private equity funds, sovereign funds, or even individuals, are clearly indicating that they will attach a premium to companies that execute responsible ESG agendas. On the regulatory front in India, the government, as well as the Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, are introducing new ESG compliance and ranking thresholds for firms. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs is focusing on key themes like sanitized value chains, labor welfare, gender equity, and other fairness indices. SEBI has mandated business responsibility and sustainability reporting called BRSR for firms. This newly awakened global consciousness bodes well for Kerala. It plays right into the ethos of the state as a location where the people, as also the terrain, are sensitive to environmental impact. Moreover, Kerala's discriminating public will increasingly watch the approach and policies adopted by firms vis-a-vis their transactions with their stakeholders, including local communities and suppliers all along the value chain. A firm's moral code, the fairness and decency with which it deals with its employees and stakeholders, are matters of concern in an enlightened state like Kerala. Thus, Kerala is a fitting locale for sustainable business and investment. In this context, it was very heartening that the state has initiated efforts to become a net zero state. I understand that a committee is at work on this magnificent endeavor. If Kerala can progress well towards the goal of becoming a carbon neutral state, this aspect could become a key differentiator to attract a fresh wave of enlightened firms and responsible investments. I would suggest that a key motive informing the state's industry and investment promotion efforts should be the theme of Kerala as a leader in sustainable business. Thus, the Industries Minister's announcement at the inaugural address of this event about the central theme of Kerala's refreshed investment promotion efforts being about sustainable investments with an ESG approach cannot have been more topical and timely. I understand that the minister focused on a 5R framework for sustainability, consisting of responsible industries and investments, reducing regulatory compliance burden, robust industrial infrastructure, renewed logistics ecosystem, and a resilient trust sector focus. The state government is also planning a star rating system for ESG compliant industries, where the better rated industries will benefit from smoother regulatory processes. So in line with this theme, Kerala can aim to be a leader in sustainable entrepreneurship. There are stellar examples of successful enterprises in this domain, such as Navolt, which has pioneered solar-powered and electric boats, and Gen Robotic Innovations, which has engineered robotic products and solutions for waste extraction from sewer manholes, a really interesting endeavor. There are well-governed, women-driven small enterprises under the aegis of Kerala's successful Kudumbashri program. This has become a global model for small entrepreneurship, women's empowerment, and poverty alleviation. Thus, Kerala can be one of the first states in the country to break away from the traditional omnibus model of investment promotion that seeks all kinds of investors, including conventional manufacturing and smokestack industries. Kerala can develop a policy and ecosystem that is focused on emerging new areas that fit with the state's ESG sensitivities and aspirations. I'm reminded of an impressive speech that the then Prime Minister of Bhutan, Shering Tobgay, made at the Vibrant Gujarat Investment Conference in January 2015. He made clear that Bhutan valued its gross national happiness more than its conventional measure of GDP. He said that he wanted investors to come to Bhutan, but only for clean, green, and sustainable businesses. All others unwelcome. He emphasized Bhutan's carbon neutral policies and pollution-free atmosphere as key attractors for investors. Given its environmental setting, its social structure, and its discriminating population, Kerala can take the lead in pursuing very similar aspirations. Three sets of compulsions: stakeholder demands, investor concerns, and regulatory tightening are converging and compelling firms to be increasingly compliant across the domains of environmental impact, social acceptability, and internal governance. We are seeing an increasing trend of firms scrambling to perform better on ESG measures. It has now been well established that the financial performance of the better firms and their ESG compliance tend to follow parallel pathways. This is a moment of opportunity for the state to position and brand itself as a unique locale with a geographical, political, and social setting will induce better compliance across the ESG axes. So let's drill down into each of the three elements of ESG as it pertains to Kerala and to entrepreneurship. Environmental fit. Kerala, as I mentioned, is working on an action plan to transform the entire state into a carbon neutral territory. There are panchayats like Meenangadi in Wayanad that have been positioning themselves to become carbon neutral, a really interesting grassroots initiative. A slew of initiatives have been launched there, including organic farming, intensive tree planting and forest creation, tree banks, water conservation, and innovative waste disposal. Given Kerala's terrain diversity, density of water bodies, and overall environmental sensitivity, compulsions to mitigate environmental impact will naturally drive investors and firms to be compliant in that direction. Now moving on to the S, social interactions. Kerala has some of the most vibrant grassroots level governance institutions in the country, and public and media scrutiny of establishments and actions that impinge on society tend to be high, as befits an advanced and civilized society. Kerala also provides relatively equitable access for all to public services, as well as the educational system, the healthcare system, and the judicial establishments. In other words, a culture of fairness and equitable treatment are inbuilt into public institutions, while behaviors that tend to be grossly unfair and injurious to the common good tend to be called out fairly quickly. Investors who can demonstrate a culture of fairness and who can establish that the value benefits exceed social and environmental costs will find the state fertile ground for sustainable value creation. And then the G, the good governance. Given the pressures on firms to improve their internal governance, policies and processes in terms of fairness in people recruitment, gender parity, HR policies, board oversight, and supply treatment, investors in the state will find that the social and cultural ecosystem, as well as the presence of an enlightened and aware workforce, will provide strong incentives for firms to adhere to good governance practices. Such an evolved ecosystem will prove to be a strong positive force that has the potential to propel firms upward along the ESG value chain. Apart from the mounting pressures for firms to be ESG compliant, great opportunities for the state arise in businesses that provide environmentally friendly products and services. These would be companies that have lower physical and environmental impact footprints, increased requirement of highly skilled workforces, and access to high quality internet infrastructure. The foundations are already in place for developing capabilities and attracting investments in a number of emerging high technology areas. In Industry 4.0, Kerala has established small clusters of frontline manufacturing units where there are opportunities to apply Industry 4.0 technologies. In artificial intelligence, Kerala has cultivated its own niche software product firms that are now entering into cutting-edge AI, augmented reality, and virtual reality. Firms in Kerala have been early movers in this area, from the days of Toons animation to emerging startups like BuildNext. Blockchain and fintech. Today, Kerala is a nerve center for Hyperledger's India collaboration efforts through the Kerala Blockchain Academy, and their graduates are sought after in industry. Electronics and high tech. Kerala, for obvious reasons, is one of the most appropriate locations for high value, low volume, technology-based industry. And there are a number of successes that can be seen. And specialized value content creation. Many content-centric industries like audio and video are going through a non-fungible token boom. This is an area for Kerala to explore. So let me touch upon some of the potential elements of a redesigned strategy for attracting investments and for enhancing entrepreneurship. For Kerala to move ahead of the pack, to the front of the pack in its investment aspirations, government, industry, academia, and specialized bodies like TiE need to come together to undertake intelligent trend spotting and to locate sectors and investors who are leading in these trends. This should feed into a program to inform target clienteles of the locational and environmental advantages that Kerala can offer. And such an exercise cannot be undertaken by government alone. It would be desirable to identify appropriate technology-intensive industries and sectors and tailor comprehensive packages for them, including land availability, energy and water, skilled workers, access to markets, and government handholding. Like the successful Kerala tourism campaign, the state can launch a global campaign to position Kerala as an attractive destination for sustainable investing and high-end value creation. This would showcase Kerala's unique ecosystem that provides natural inducements for firms to improve their positioning in terms of ESG compliance, as I've just described. In the domain of entrepreneurship, the focus should move increasingly to sectors, areas, and products where the value creation and technical elements are high value and low volume and congruent with ESG principles. In all this, TiE can act as an enabler, a catalyst for many of these initiatives, and also as an honest broker to bring the various stakeholders together, because none of these can be done by any particular stakeholder alone. So in conclusion, let me note that global value chains and businesses are being disrupted and transitioned by a perfect storm of converging forces. These include pressures to be ESG compliant, and we will hear more and more of this in the years to come, the emergence of new domains, disaggregated value creation based on high-speed connectivity, and a number of similar supporting trends. There is a need for safe harbors offering security and sustainability in the wake of recent geopolitical tensions affecting supply chains. I'm here in the US, and this is one of the top topics of conversation here today. Kerala as a territory has the natural endowments and social attributes required to emerge as a leading destination for technology-rich, sustainable investments. Positioning Kerala to take advantage of these novel trends cannot obviously be the task, as I said, of government alone. Industry bodies like TiE, opinion makers, the media, and concerned institutions need to work in concert towards this goal. And I have no doubt that TiE, Kerala, with its enlightened and civic-minded leadership, can and will play a vital catalytic role in supporting government, industry, and civil society in these efforts. I want to wish TiE Kerala and the state's entrepreneurships all success. Back to you, Jimon.
Arun, thank you. That was very insightful. I think you kind of analyzed everything that's been happening in Kerala and around the world and kind of summarized it for us. Thank you so much. Couple of things which came to my mind, Arun, as I was, engrossed in your presentation is, we spoke about all the new emerging areas, the industry 4.0, the fintech, AI, augmented reality, electronics, high-end value creation kind of thing. But you also know that nearly much of Kerala has been running over the last 50, 60 years with money coming in from the Middle East. Now that's slowly coming to a close with the kind of changes and the localization that is happening in the Middle East. So people are coming back. So there is a large capable workforce coming back into Kerala. There are not enough industries today. Okay, what we speak about is the kind of investments that we need to do today for tomorrow. But right now, right here today, when people come back, they don't have the necessary opportunities. Neither do they have the skill sets to come up with, these kind of modern changes that are in the industry, because people in the Middle East come from a, different kind of a work environment, which clearly is not suited for the new generation industries. So there is one whole segment of people who are going to be disillusioned when they come back. In fact, I have relatives coming back and saying, "Oh, is it so expensive here? Because I could buy tomato for half the price in Dubai, and I'm paying 150 rupees here in Kerala. What is happening here?" So there is a kind of a disconnect. So that is one challenge that we are going to face. And the second thing which I wanted to ask is, why haven't you mentioned agriculture? So these two questions come straight to my mind, and I would like you to shed some light on it.
I'd say the second one is a very easy one. It was a miss. I should have mentioned it. And I know TiE Kerala has actually been a pioneer in looking at and promoting entrepreneurship in agribusiness. So it's really an area where Kerala can lead. I know there are many great examples of successful agribusiness-based businesses in Kerala. So it should very much have been there. But it's not the first thing you think of in Kerala, because when you look at the population intensity in Kerala, while agriculture has a great role to play, you also have to have other ways to employ people in a much more intensive fashion. But you touched on a very important area of skills, and I think skills upskilling is going to be a very important area throughout. And in this context, very interesting to see at the high end what's happening in Kerala, the digital Kerala University. There are the IIT in Palakkad. So I'm really excited to see the increase in high quality institutions that's coming to Kerala. And it's very appropriate that Kerala is at the forefront of the high end of education. Then you've got the general upskilling and the reskilling that needs to be done. And that is an area which probably needs a separate kind of focus. People will be returning and they need to be learning new skills to fit in to the new industries that Kerala needs to create. In the US, a good example I've seen is of community colleges. These are not major degree granting colleges. They're like 2-year programs that very quickly upskill people of all ages. So people go to these community colleges at all ages. So those kinds of approaches will need to be addressed on the skilling. Finally, I also want to say that I feel that Kerala will, for a long time to come, be an exporter of talent. See, a state with 35 million people may not always be able to provide all of them. Hopefully at some point it will, but they may still continue to be, and that's okay. That's why it's really important for Kerala to keep its focus on education and on upgrading the education, so that the export of talent will be higher quality talent. And actually, I see nothing wrong with that.
Thank you. That just brought me to another very important point for all those people who are actually watching this session. There's a huge opportunity here in upskilling and reskilling. And that is something which I think is going to benefit not just the people who are going to get involved in it, but all the people who are coming back. Um, and we just talked about it. So that's, I'm just picking those two words from you, Arun, on upskilling and reskilling. And I just realized that is something that must be done. There is a huge opportunity here from a business perspective and also from a society perspective, that people come back and learn different skill sets to adapt and to join the industries that are currently operating, and to, and yeah, as you rightly said, to provide the right skill sets to adapt to those new opportunities. There's one,
Education and skilling,
yeah,
that itself is a big entrepreneurial opportunity,
yeah,
as Baiju has clearly shown.
absolutely. So there is an interesting question from Sunil here. What are the typical KPIs to measure the ESG rating of a state? How would you measure it broadly?
This is an interesting question. There are a number of approaches being taken. Now, for companies, there are standards emerging. As I mentioned, a standard that SEBI has put forward. Then the MCA has put forward some suggestions on rating supply chains. On states, you would want to take a higher level view of measuring environmental progress, governance progress, societal indicators. I would suggest it's an area for Kerala to think about being a pioneer in setting out how it measures itself. I'm not aware of any countries or states that have begun those kinds of macro measurements of ESG, but it's a really interesting question and something to follow up on with a straw man approach in Kerala.
Absolutely. And, we don't have a straight answer for that, but I can think of the same example which you mentioned, Bhutan, happiness index. That's something which we can actually look at. Maybe no other state in India has done that. Why don't we start it here? And look at what we can do in terms of, because that kind of literally encompasses everything when you look at it. And that's the great part of, that's a great part. Yeah.
President Abdul Kalam had actually at one time created a metric to measure happiness. He was also quite taken by this approach of measuring happiness. And I remember he came up with a very complicated formula of how to measure it. Some interesting thinking has gone into that whole area by different kinds of people.
I think we will look up that after this. And Arun, from a personal perspective, you've been in this journey for a long time. You've been in Kerala, you've been in India, you've been in the US, you've tried to connect US and India. How has it been over your career? What have you, how have you observed those changes impacting what Kerala is today? And in your mind, how do you see it evolving over time? With the kind, you heard the industries minister speak. So just give your perspective, because you have so much of rich experience and you've seen how the past has evolved. So where do you see us going next? And, you can be candid about it.
Actually, I'm very much an optimist, and I'm very high on Kerala's potential. And the reason I like Thai Kerala is because I see, I see Thai thinking that same way. The optimism, the energy, the creativity that I see in Thai Kerala is something I really, really admire, and I feel one with that, as opposed to, unfortunately, a lot of the negativity I hear. I mean, unfortunately, it's an extreme thing to say, but a lot of people outside Kerala, from Kerala, are not aware of Kerala as it stands today. So they often carry some old perceptions of Kerala, and they're not necessarily the best ambassadors of Kerala. So I feel that in some sense, we need to, from Kerala, educate expatriate Keralites about what's going on in Kerala. People don't know how many tens of thousands of people are working, for example, in Technopark. I mean, how many people know that? Some years ago, even people in Trivandrum didn't know about that. Now I think more of them know that. So I think there's a certain amount of, there's a dichotomy of people carrying an old view of Kerala with them, not really realizing what Kerala is today and where Kerala wants to go. I mean, the modern ideas in Kerala are incredible. The other day, I heard the story of how, there's going to be a change in how to ask for services. You don't beg for services or say yours humbly. You request services that are due to you as a taxpayer. Now, this is really modern avant-garde thinking. So the state is really ahead of the country in so many ways, in the way it thinks about things. And that's, to me, very exciting and just shows that the state will just forge ahead.
Thank you, Arun. And, I would have loved to have this conversation continue, but I've been given a very short window. And I'm sure that you have so much more to come back to us with your thoughts and views. And we'll keep that window open, and I will connect with you after this session. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful. I know winter is setting in North Carolina. Have a great day, and wishing you a fantastic Thanksgiving break as well.
Thank you, Jimon. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure.
Okay. Bye, everyone.